I really do think you're getting to a point now, especially if Duke does wind up getting Dame Sarr, you're getting to a point now where the options are really starting to dry up, and you just don't have that many shots left at this point.
Pay heed, all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. Big show today. We're going to try to wade into the Dame Sarr situation and break that down a little bit more in detail. Just a peek behind the curtain. We've been kind of waiting to record an episode in anticipation that possibly Sarr could be a Jayhawk. And now that seems like it may not be as likely. So we're going to be talking about that, talking about where things go from here for Kansas if Sarr is not a Jayhawk, and so on and so forth. So that's what's on deck for today's show. Of course, if you have not already, please subscribe, Apple and Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Thank you so much if you have already subscribed. We're getting pretty close. We're almost to 900, so really appreciate those of you that have subscribed already. And if you haven't, it's literally one click, and boom, you're subscribed. It's that easy. So, and thank you so much on the audio side as well. Apple, Spotify, if you subscribe there, leave a 5-star rating and review. Leave a comment, of course, as always, anywhere that you enjoy the show. You can find us on social media as well. I paid KCSN, at K Flaherty KCSN. I'm at Nick Springer 29. So lots of ways to get in contact with the show. Before we do dive into the Dame Sarr stuff, some news that did happen earlier in the week, over the weekend, is Kansas football. They moved quickly and aggressively to secure an additional tight end position. We talked about the departure of Keon Burnett who transferred in from Arizona, then transferred back to Arizona, by the way. So decided to take a little bit of a hiatus. He pulled a Gage Keys, except in a much shorter time period.
Yeah, well, one spring in Lawrence was all he needed to Tucson.
Yeah, look, Kansas cannot be that bad. Okay, look, I get it. The weather in Arizona is nice, whatever, but Kansas can't be that bad. I mean, come on. But all jokes aside, that opened up a situation where Kansas needed to probably bring in an additional tight end because. If nothing else, for depth purposes, right? You start to look at that room, and if you remove Keon Burnett, you have Deshaun Hanukkah, who has not played a snap for Kansas yet because of injuries. You have Leighton Keir, you have a couple of young guys in there, guys like Jaden Hand, Carson Brune, but that became a position of need because you lose a body in that room and you want to add some depth. Well, Kansas acted very quickly, and they secured a commitment earlier in the week from Broden Groon. He is a transfer tight end out of Rice. I will say the one thing, Kevin, there is seems to be a bit of discrepancy as to just how many years of eligibility he may have left. I believe he played 3 years at Rice, I believe, but was a redshirt, and I don't know, it's a bit weird. But the point being is that he may have a couple years left of eligibility. He does come from Rice. In 2023, he had 39 catches for 383 yards, 3 touchdowns. In 2024, this past season, he only played in 4 games, or played in 5 games actually, before suffering an injury, and that ended his season. So now he comes to Kansas with a chance to ultimately compete, more than likely, for at least some rotational snaps for KU. I mean, you look at the depth chart now for Kansas without Burnett. You have Hanukkah, obviously you figure to be your tight end 1. Leighton Keir, who seems to have taken a step forward possibly in the offseason. He could be fighting for that, but then you throw Groon in the mix, and he could be right there with Leighton Keir and probably have a chance to get on the field coming up this fall.
Yeah, you wanted another tight end who could catch the football, basically, and it's something that he's proven that he could do at Rice. He had a lot of snaps at Rice, I think over 1,000 career snaps, and so you have somebody that's really experienced, somebody that's been a factor in the passing game and has delivered in that area. When you look at what Kansas has, right, Deshaun Hanukkah, when he's fully healthy and fully confident and all of those things, is a really good receiving tight end that can stress defenses with his speed. Leighton Keir is kind of a move guy, right? You can kind of move him around like an H-back. He can play a little bit of that Jared Casey sort of fullback role where he can line up in the backfield and you can do some different things with him. Carson Brune is more of a, hey, he's going to have his hand on the ground and he's going to block his face off, and he can catch the ball. Like, I'm not saying he can't, but I think that he, as of right now, maybe trends a little bit more that blocking way. And so adding another guy to that room that you feel good about in the passing game who can hop into the rotation, because Nick, last year, there were a couple times they played 4 tight ends, and I realized that that was a different offensive coordinator in Jeff Grimes, but that's also kind of who KU wants to be, not necessarily 4 tight ends at once, but having 4 guys that you feel like, hey, you can play 2 at a time, you can play 3 at a time, you can rotate these guys through. And so all of a sudden that rotation, I think, is looking pretty filled out and fairly solid with guys that have a chance to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, and look, as I said earlier, Deshaun Haneke got hurt last year and ended up not playing. So this is also a situation where you just want an additional body in case of injury, right? I mean, in case something happens to Haneke or Leighton Kear or something like that, you just want an additional player in there that you feel confident can go out and maybe execute a little bit. So, once again, I've talked about it before, but I'll say it again. Like, one of the more impressive things about Matt Leipold's staff is when a need is identified, they tend to move pretty quickly. And this was one where they moved very quickly on, right? Once Burnett was gone, they quickly shifted focus and recognized that this was a position that they needed to add and didn't waste a lot of time in doing so.
Yep.
So I think you got to tip your cap to the football staff for doing that and identifying a player that they can bring in and hopefully get a chance to get on the field for Kansas in the fall in 2025. Okay, let's shift gears and now dive into a little bit more of this Dame Sarr conversation. If you checked out our previous shows, Dame Sarr. I'm just going to kind of take a step back for a second, Kevin, and look at this from sort of the 30,000 foot view of Dame Sarr. Who is he? He is an international wing from Italy. Has been playing in one of the higher leagues in Europe. Played a little bit more this past spring and kind of showcased some of his talent. Has been projected into the first round potentially of the 2026 draft. He's 18. He's going to turn 19 in the summer. He's at 6'6". He's got long arms. Again, checks a lot of the boxes that, like we talked about on our previous shows, of what Kansas needs at the wing position, that's really sort of the continues to be the biggest need for Kansas at this point. When you look at the starting lineup and continuing to fill out the rest of this roster. And so with sort of the lack of domestic opportunities left for Kansas, really, when you think about players that have already committed elsewhere, players that are testing the NBA draft waters, this became a prospect that I think Kansas was very interested in. And he was on a visit to Kansas last weekend. Seemed like the visit went pretty well, all things considered. In fact, we were kind of waiting earlier in the week for potentially an announcement of a possible commitment, but that didn't happen. And unfortunately, Kevin, that's kind of the cardinal rule that you talk about. What do you do? What do you do when a guy is on a visit?
You don't let him leave.
Exactly. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, Sarr left uncommitted, and that kind of left the door open. But what's really shifted in this recruitment, and we kind of talked about it previously, is Duke was a school that was seemingly around on Sarr interested as well. I think Oregon was also interested, but Duke is the one we really want to focus on here because kind of an interesting cyclical way. Duke is in a similar situation that Kansas was in terms of trying to get Darian Williams, but for Duke, it was Cedric Coward, a guy we had talked about, where Cedric Coward actually committed to Duke earlier in April to play there, but was also in the NBA draft. And over the early couple of days of this week, as the NBA draft combine has started to get going, Coward has seemingly tested very well. He's seemingly impressed a lot of NBA teams. In the latest NBA mock draft posted on Tuesday on ESPN, he was projected right at the beginning of the second round. It seems like even since then, he's jumped up even more so. This is a direct quote from Coward from the combine. He said, in regards to what he's deciding, basically said, it really depends on what I hear. At the end of the day, the decision I'm going to make is based off the information I get. And right now, the information is definitely leaning towards staying in the draft. And I can say that. We got to figure out the best decision to make for myself and the best decision to make for my family as I go forward. So basically, things have been trending very positively for Cedric Coward in the NBA draft, right? He's gone from a guy that maybe wasn't a super highly regarded to somebody who could get into the first round and maybe even higher, right? Now that he's gotten to get in front of NBA teams. And for a guy like Coward specifically, this was really important because of the fact that, as we highlighted when talking about him, when Kansas was interested in him, he suffered an injury pretty early in the season last year. And so for a lot of NBA teams, you're thinking, okay, well, he was pretty good at a lower level. He goes to Washington State. He does really well for 5-6 games, then deals with an injury. So what are we working with here? Seems like NBA teams are pretty impressed with him. The reason why that's important as it relates to Kansas and Dame Sarr is Duke is now in a situation where they seemingly may have thought they had Cedric Coward, but if he's going to go and stay in the NBA draft, they've started to pivot. And that's kind of where the situation comes in with Sarr, where I think Duke was a team that had interest in Sarr, and Sarr had interest in Duke as well. But it didn't seem like there was any availability there with potentially having Coward on the roster for Duke. That seemingly has reopened that opportunity with the possibility of Coward staying in the draft. And so, unfortunately for Kansas, it's something that is maybe a little bit out of their control. You think about the financial side of it. Duke probably has a strong offer. I'm sure Kansas has a strong offer as well from the money side. And it's not always about the money. I know we talk about money a lot on this show, and I think for good reason. It's an important aspect of it, but it is not everything, right? I mean, listen, I hate to say it as much as anybody else, but over the past handful of years, Duke has been the better program. I mean, you look at Duke; they're about to have the number 1 pick with Cooper Flagg. They've had a lot of guys go to the NBA. They've been really, really good over the past couple of seasons, and so it makes sense. Like that, those things matter too, right? Like these are kids that are seeing what programs are doing in the short term, right? So you can say, oh well, Kansas obviously has over the last 20 years. They've got they got 2 national titles. They've won 17 Big 12 titles, whatever. And that stuff matters too. But sometimes it's more of a, what have you done for me lately type situation. And Duke has been really good with John Shire, which is to credit to them. So I think there's a lot of different factors at play here, but that has seemingly reopened it. There's a possibility, I think, of Sarr going on a visit to Duke now coming up this weekend. So this is something that Kevin, unfortunately for Kansas, has really shifted from a very positive situation to a bit more of a negative.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the defending champions in the NBA. You got the Boston Celtics and their star wing, who unfortunately just got hurt, Jason Tatum, who played at Duke when Shire was an assistant coach there. And so what you're talking about, I think, is important to note in sort of that recency thing, right? Because if you look at the NBA and who you can point to your NBA wings being, Bill Self has Andrew Wiggins, Bill Self has Christian Brown more recently, who's playing well, but he's not Jason Tatum, in terms of being a first-team All-NBA guy. And then you look at the NBA draft coming up, and not only do you have Cooper Flagg going number 1, you've got Con Kniffel going, probably lottery. You've got Malawak, going high, and Duke just played in the Final Four, and so. The case of what have you done for me lately, as you brought up, especially if you're a foreign wing and you're like, hey, I've got 1 year to come to the States and make this thing work and then go. Those trends are pointing pretty hard at Duke right now. And that's not a knock on Kansas. I don't think. I think the trends would point towards Duke against just about anybody in college basketball from that NBA standpoint for a wing who's in a 1 year type spot. And so I do think it's unfortunate the way that's worked out for Kansas. Great the way it's working out for Cedric Coward. It's you love to see that, because Coward probably, if he had gotten the chance to play the full year and really show the breadth of his skills, maybe there wouldn't have been a question. He wouldn't have been returning to college basketball at all. And so you do like to see that for the kid. The unfortunate thing is, hey, KU and Duke both want a wing. Sarr is the best wing out there, especially if you consider Williams more of kind of that 3/4 type guy. And Sarr is a better NBA prospect than Williams is. I do think, and I'm sure we'll talk about this after the break, I do think Williams is the guy that would impact winning in 2025, 2026 more than Sarr is. But from an NBA standpoint, I do think Sarr is the guy that has a little bit more draw. Both KU and Duke are looking for that type of wing, and unfortunately, Duke, had that spot potentially open up with the Cedric Coward stuff.
Yeah, I do want to continue this conversation, but like you said, this is a good chance to take a quick break. And a good chance to remind you that you can shop over at homefieldapparel.com using the promo code PAY24. They've got 40 plus great Kansas items. I've got the Jayhawks script shirt on today, still representing Kansas, even if it's a little bit of cloudier times right now for KU basketball. Still supporting. You should too. And you can also support Kansas over 120 other schools. They've got motorsports as well. Apparel also that they've recently released. They've got a new KU hat. I actually had a friend rocking the KU hat. I thought, man, I don't really love hats, but that's a pretty sick hat. So I might have to get that one. So check out the KU hat. Check out the 40 plus other items that KU has over there at homefieldapparel.com. And use the promo code PAY24 for 15% off your first order. More Kansas basketball talk is coming up next. Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Once again, if you haven't, please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, if you're listening on the audio side. If you're joining us on YouTube, drop a comment, like the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers over there on YouTube, so please hit that. It takes one click to subscribe over on the YouTube channel, and we really very much appreciate it. We're talking KU basketball today. We've been talking plenty of KU football throughout the spring. We're going to talk more KU football as well. We've got some special guests lined up as well coming up in the near future. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned for some great interviews. We're going to be talking to head coach for the KU baseball team, Dan Fitzgerald, next week as KU prepares to enter into the postseason. We've got some other guests that we're very excited to potentially interview as well to bring you guys that over the course of the spring and into the summer as well as we go through the off season. So definitely want to stay subscribed. And again, if you're looking for more KU football content, we've done plenty of KU football position breakdowns. You can go check out any of our previous shows as well on our feeds. And we really appreciate it if you do so. Once again, leave a 5-star rating and review on audio. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the show, and drop a comment. We love hearing from you guys in the comment section as well. So continuing this conversation, Kevin, I think for a lot of KU fans, the question becomes, okay, this is Kansas, and yes, we mentioned Duke, but is this potentially a blow for KU from the standpoint of Bill Self is known as being a closer. He's known as being able to get this type of stuff done. Where does that leave KU? Is this, I mean, I guess, is this is this an alarm bells type situation where it's, oh my gosh, you're losing a guy that you have on campus that you could have locked down? I don't know. I guess where are you kind of sitting with the potential of this? And just real quick before I let you answer that, to be clear, Dame Sarr he's not committed, so it is still not impossible that he might come.
Still hunting season. Remember, remember we were sitting here talking on the show about how unlikely it looked that Flaherty would come back to Kansas at one point, and how that was a situation that looked like it was trending away from Kansas, and they were able to figure that out. Now, obviously, Flaherty had the history at Kansas. You had the relationships already built there. My point was just, to your point, these things are fluid, right? Like that's maybe the main thing you should take away from this, if nothing else, is that these things can change in a hurry. And so, yes, to your point, right now it does not look great for Kansas, apparently in the Sarr recruitment, but weirder things have happened, and Kansas is not out at this point on Dame Sarr, by all accounts. He has not picked Duke yet. And so I do think that there's still that possibility. But to your earlier point, Nick, I think looking at it with Dame Sarr, and I think you and I both tend to include Darian Williams in a lot of our projections, not necessarily because, hey, Kansas is absolutely going to get this guy, but because, like we were saying with Flaherty, when you're looking at the available pieces and you're looking at the way Kansas is going to, quote unquote, butter its bread in 2025, 2026, I think that picture includes Darian Williams if you're going to have a successful season. I don't want to put all the pressure on one guy, but I do think that that's a pretty significant part of that equation. And I think Dame Sarr, as weird as it sounds, because I think he's got a chance to be really good. We talked about him on the show quite a bit, and I encourage you to go back and watch what we said about him. I think Dame Sarr was almost a great luxury, and that if you added Dame Sarr and Darian Williams, at that point you're possibly talking about the number one team in the country, right? In terms of the way that you're lining up and all the things that you're able to do. I think if you were able to get Darian Williams and not Dame Sarr, if it trends that way, and Darian Williams, I'm sure there are those of you that are following along on his combine journey as well. He didn't measure super well. He's not a freak athlete, but those were things that I think we kind of knew going in. But at the same time, if he's getting feedback and things like that at the combine, those are things that can cause somebody to say, hey, we like you, but you're not going to get this sort of guarantee out of us that you're looking for, and could have him trend to Kansas. But I do think if Kansas misses on Dame Sarr, but gets Darian Williams, you're still cooking at that point, right? Like, I don't think that losing Dame Sarr is something where you look at it and you're just like, oh, there goes the season. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But to me, for 25-26, Darian Williams is the more important piece and part of that equation. Having him and Dame Sarr, like, you're cooking with gas at that point. Like, it's fantastic. You've got a great roster. You've got 3 potential first-round NFL or NBA draft picks. But if you don't get him, you've still got 2, right? You've still got Darren Peterson. You've still got Flaherty that, with a much bigger role, could be a first-round projected type of guy. I know some of the scouts that I've talked to expect Flaherty to be a first-rounder next year. If you have 2 first-round picks and then Darian Williams, who's a first-team All-Big 12 guy, that's a pretty strong, sort of three poles of your tent set up in the dirt at that point.
Well, first of all, you mentioning the possibility of being the number one team gave me a heart attack.
Yeah. Of course.
I do not want Kansas.
I'm not saying that they will be in the AP poll, or relax on that. I meant more just sort of, you're in that spot where you feel like, hey, we've got the number one team in the country on a given night. Like, you can beat anybody.
Yes, just please do not put KU preseason number 1.
Number 2 is cool. Number 2 is cool.
Historically, KU at number 1 has resulted in lackluster seasons. But to what you were mentioning earlier, I think it's deflating to potentially lose a guy like Sarr when you had a chance to maybe close out on him, right? Whatever it may have been, whether he was on campus and you made him an offer or whatever, or however that worked out. That's definitely deflating, right? And that's definitely it's definitely a pretty big blow. And yes, the prospect of Darian Williams, I do want to talk about a little bit more about that and maybe where Kansas can pivot to, because that kind of leads into what I'll say here, which is I hate to use this term, Kevin, but I feel like we're kind of into a little bit of desperation mode for Kansas.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. It is the middle of May, and you still need another starter on your roster, right? You look at this roster for Kansas.
At least one, maybe 2.
Correct. Like, you could feasibly roll out a lineup with Darren Peterson and Dawson and Council and Trey White and Floyd Bidunga. Like you have you could put out a starting 5, right?
Yeah,
but it's not the starting 5 you want to put out. There is still a starting wing position sized hole in the roster right now. And you're in the middle of May. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but the options are few and far between at this point for maybe what Kansas could be looking for. That's where I think the Sarr situation hurts a little bit more. Is I think I probably agree with you a little bit in that when you think about the possibility of like a Darian Williams versus a Dame Sarr, is that Williams comes in with a much higher floor. Obviously, he's done it at the Big 12 level and has been very successful in a first-team All Big 12 caliber type player. But you look at Sarr, and the potential could be there to have a little bit of a higher ceiling, right? And in terms of athleticism, and one of the things that I was really excited about, and we didn't get to talk about it that much because unfortunately, and now it seems like Dame Sarr may not play for Kansas, but one of the things that I was excited about is you roll out a lineup with Darren Peterson, and let's just say it's Melvin Council at the 2, you put Sarr at the 3, Trey White and Floyd Bidunga. That on paper to me is like a top 5 defensive lineup in the country, just right there. So that's what had me excited about Sarr, and then his potential offensive ceiling as well. So I think that's probably why it hurts the most. Is you're sitting here, it's the middle of May. You had a potential solution to that starting wing spot on campus in Lawrence, and you weren't able to quite get it done for whatever reason or another, whether it was maybe Sarr wanting to still possibly see what was going to happen or however it may have played out. And now it looks like you're maybe going to lose that. And yes, you mentioned Darian Williams. Darian Williams is far, far from a guarantee at this point in terms of will he even come out of the draft? And if he does come out of the draft, there are other schools that are also in a similar situation to Kansas looking for that sort of final late portal, I guess, if you want to call it that, addition, right? So that what that means is that's going to be driving the price up. That's going to be driving up the amount of effort you have to try to put in to get a player like that. So to me, is it disappointing to lose a guy like to potentially lose a guy like Sarr? Yes. The bigger disappointment is the context of this was a guy that was essentially a hand and glove fit for what you're looking for at this point.
Yep.
There's not very many other options. It's middle of May. You had him on campus and you were unable to fully close the deal. And now it's been reopened to the situation where he may end up, going and taking a visit to Duke and potentially could end up there. Right. I mean, so often we see when guys go on visits who a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, where does the guy end up playing? Whoever gets the last visit. Right. And so that really stings, I think, if you're Kansas. So that's the big, like, if this was a situation where, let's just say it was like a generic high school recruitment and Dame Sarr is a top 20 player in the country out of high school, and he would be a good player for you and you're excited to get him, and he ends up going somewhere else. It's like, oh, that would be a real bummer. It's the context of, hey, it's late in this offseason. You still are looking for that last starting spot. It seems like he would be a really, really strong fit for that. And you had him on campus and you couldn't close the deal. That's what I think makes this a really a much bigger disappointment for Kansas, because if they do end up in a situation where they, for whatever reason, they can't get Darian Williams either, you're going to look at that and say, man, that maybe really was a flashpoint in the offseason for Kansas to go from being what we think is probably still going to end up being a really good team, right? I mean, you have the number one, more than likely overall pick on your team in Darren Peterson. You have Flory Badunga as well. You've added some guys out of the transfer portal that you and I both really like in terms of fit. But you're right. It does feel like Kansas is missing maybe that last piece of real potential star power. And this was a chance to do that. And you swung on it and unable to close the deal. And now you're in a situation now where it could turn into a bit more of a desperation type mode for Kansas to look for that piece, or that piece just may not exist, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because I think that when Sarr kind of popped up as a possibility, it seemed so serendipitous, right? Like it felt like, manna from heaven sort of dropping down, like, oh, Kansas needs a wing. And there just happens to be this international wing as these other wing options are kind of drying up in the portal. And you're sitting here and saying, okay, there aren't many options left. And you're starting to get a little nervous. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, hey, there's this wing who plays for Barcelona. He's a potential first-round pick. It's like, cool, sign me up. And the fact, too, Nick, by him visiting and everything, and by all accounts, how close this thing was to being done, it feels like you got a head start, right? Like you were out in front. And you think about, the people that you always feel worst about in the Olympics, right, are the distance guys that run a really long race. They're leading at the end. And then, of course, like somebody passes them in like the final 20 meters to win the gold medal. And you're just like, oh, my God, like how could you run that race and be up for so long? And then somebody else, it winds up being the winner. Like you're going to have to sit on those last, 10, 20 meters and just think about that for 4 years. And in this case, it feels like Kansas ran the race right, did the things right, got that lead going into the final 20 meters or 20 meters from the gold medal. And now all of a sudden the Jayhawks have been caught. And so it's not over yet. There's still those final 10 meters or so to go. But usually those people that get caught in the final 20 meters, they don't pull back ahead. They've lost the momentum, whatever else. And so I think that's the frustrating thing about this is when you look at it from that perspective and the perspective of, like you said, it's a supply and demand thing, right? Like if there were 5 other wings out there that fit exactly what Kansas did, you're not sweating losing Dame Sarr. And that's not a knock on Sarr. That's just saying if you had another direction to pivot, then you would pivot. But we're getting to that point now in the nitty gritty where you're not seeing a lot of those guys out there. And that doesn't mean that there's not another international guy out there somewhere. That doesn't mean that you can't get somebody who can give you a certain percentage of what Dame Sarr could do. That's not even to say that you couldn't find somebody that fits really, really well. Maybe you wind up finding a guy out there who's a 6'5" wing shooter. And like, that's what he does. And you're like, hey, this is a great fit with the other guys that you've got out there. But for right now, with the tunnel that we're looking through and the options being there, to your point, it certainly seems to put a lot of pressure on that Darian Williams basket to finish that thing up. And I think that when you look at Sarr, like I said, if you didn't get Sarr and you got Darian Williams, like I'm kind of okay with that. Like it's not as good, but I think that you still, solve the issue. Basically, you're still going to be a really, really good team. You're still going to have a team that's good enough to compete for a national title if everything comes together. But there was also a possibility that you got Sarr and you didn't get Darian Williams, and Sarr would have given you some cover from that respect too. And so now, again, that's not out the window. It's not done yet, but right now it seems like it's trending that way that Kansas, may not be able to finish out that recruitment.
Yeah, we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into that aspect of it, which is, okay, you don't get Sarr, let's say, what next? What do you do next? We're going to talk about that, a little bit more about the roster coming up after this quick break.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. I'm member FDIC. I've said it a couple times now, but please subscribe if you have not already. Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. So yeah, Kevin, this is where the conversation really becomes interesting. I mean, we've kind of danced around a little bit, but this idea of what now, like what happens now for Kansas, assuming that you now maybe are not able to get Sarr and he ends up potentially taking the visit to Duke and going to Duke. One other aspect of that I wanted to mention briefly is this was kind of a situation that worked out for Duke, unfortunately for Kansas, is that you think about Duke gets Cedric Coward, whatever potential money they were going to give him, if Coward's going to stay in the draft, that becomes freed up for them to have additional resources to go after a guy like Sarr to replace it. Whereas Kansas just has the resources they have at that moment. So that's another, I guess, interesting aspect of it. But yeah, going forward, where does Kansas go from here? You start to look around. We talked about it. Not many real high profile options for Kansas at this point. And that's what I think stings about this Dame Sarr recruitment is one aspect of it we didn't really mention earlier in the show is this season is really about, I would say, Kevin, from the Kansas perspective, maximizing the 1 year you have of Darren Peterson, right? Yeah. You know, you're going to have Peterson. He's going to be a one and done. You know, this is his only season. You want to make the most of that with him because of the type of player that he is, right? So building a roster around him that can go compete for a national championship. And so losing out on Sarr impacts that. You mentioned Darian Williams quite a bit. He's a guy that may end up staying in the NBA draft. It's not entirely clear. In the ESPN latest mock draft, he was mid-second round, 45. So we'll see what his thought process is. As you said, he didn't measure particularly great. I think he was 6'4.5" barefoot, which was a little interesting, and obviously not the most athletic
long arms either.
Yeah. So, but again, he's a proven Big 12 high level player, and he's a guy that absolutely you want at Kansas. But like you said, your eggs kind of all go into that basket now. Unfortunately, if you're Kansas, like there just isn't really a lot of other great options for KU at this point in terms of that position. And that's a little bit of a scary prospect, right? I think that's the thing about this that hurts is there is not a long line of players that you could pivot to. There is not, a bunch of guys you could say, okay, well, we didn't get Sarr, but here's a guy that has a similar skill set that we think we have a chance at. That's not really the case. And again, with Darian Williams, it's not even a guarantee he's going to come back out of the draft at this point. I mean, it's, I would say it just from the outside looking in, I would think it's probably a little more likely than not likely, but it's certainly far from a guarantee. And obviously we've seen how quickly this stuff can change. I mean, you go from over the last 48 hours earlier in the week thinking that Sarr was going to come to Kansas, Cedric Coward was going to go back to Duke, and now that changes with some feedback, right, from the NBA for Coward. So there's it's a whole domino effect of we never know where these things can go. But certainly for Kansas, like I said, I hate to use that term, but to me, the thought that keeps coming to mind is you're getting into a little bit of desperation mode if you're KU at this point, considering you don't have what you would consider to be a full starting lineup really, and it's the middle of May, and you start to look at the rest of the guys in the NBA draft. RJ Lewis is another name that is in the NBA draft that could be somebody you maybe take a peek at, I guess, but I don't know how likely that is. So
I think Kansas kicked the wheels there, and I'm not sure.
Yeah,
that's I'm not sure that after kicking the tires there that's something that
that's realistic.
Yeah.
So you start to look around and it is very scary to think about putting all your eggs into the basket of a player that may or may not come back from the NBA draft. And if he does come back, he's going to be highly coveted probably by other schools that may be interested in a similar position, especially a player of his caliber. So there's a lot up in the air for Kansas right now. And again, I want to reiterate, I think you and I feel pretty confident in what Kansas has on the roster at the moment. Like Jaden Dawson, Melvin Council, 2 really strong additions. We like Trey White, obviously Darren Peterson, Floyd Verdugo coming back. Like that, you have a really strong stable at the moment, but it does feel like you are one piece away from going from being a top 25 team, top 20 team to a top 10, top 5 team. And that's the piece that Kansas is still missing here in terms of starting caliber quality players.
Yeah, I've said all along, I think Darren Peterson leads Kansas in scoring next year. I think the second leading scorer isn't on roster just yet. But as these pieces kind of fall by the wayside, Nick, you're looking more and more likely that maybe that second leading scorer is on the roster, and that's not necessarily what you want. I looked it up while we were talking, and 7 players remain from 24/7's top 135 guys. And keep in mind, not all those guys are wings, one, and and Kansas needs wing guys. Most of those guys have NBA decisions, like you were saying, like with Darian Williams, Haggerty, RJ Luis, and so all those guys. And so they aren't necessarily guys that you can count on. And do you know why I use top 135, Nick? At number 137, uncommitted, the type of guy that you're looking at is Rakeem Passmore. And that's not a knock on Rakeem Passmore. I just think it's instructive to say, hey, if you strike out on those guys in the top 135 or so, the guys just outside of it are going to be guys like that aren't necessarily proven at this level and not necessarily what you would want to go into next season saying, hey, this guy is going to carry a major part of your offensive load. And that's not a knock on Rakeem Passmore in any way. I just think that if you're looking in the portal for an impact guy that coming out of the portal, you can expect that guy to be an impact guy, there aren't very many options left. And so I think that you're looking at a situation where at this point you're swinging really hard on Darian Williams, really hoping that works out. And then you're monitoring things overseas to say, hey, who can we bring in that's going to have some Johnny Furphy like upside, that's going to be somebody that, potentially isn't maybe going to be a tentpole star type of guy, but is going to be somebody that gives you some upside on a night-by-night basis that can come out. Maybe they drop 15 points in a big game here and there, but they aren't necessarily going to be a leading scorer type of guy. But I really do think you're getting to a point now, especially if Duke does wind up getting Dame Sarr, you're getting to a point now where the options are really starting to dry up, and you just don't have that many shots left at this point.
And by the way, you mentioned Rakeem Passmore, and K fans ears may perk up and say, why not give him a call? Why not see, you mentioned Flory, you got Flory back with the connections. Why not give him a call? I don't think that that's a possibility based off of, with those types of situations, you never know when guys enter the transfer portal, right? Is it a situation where that relationship is still there between the player and the staff, or is it sort of severed? It's always hard to really know for sure. But I would
love to have Rakeem Passmore back.
Yeah, I know.
I really would. Those are the types of guys that have typically made jumps under Bill Self. Athletic wings who stick around, and we said it all season long, Nick. I feel like where Bill Self thrives is when he has those guys in his program for multiple years, and they can grow and sort of build success upon success. And maybe they weren't all world right away. Frank Mason was Kansas's third best point guard at the end of his freshman year, behind Nadir Tharp and Connor Frankamp, and wound up being pretty good. Devontae Graham wasn't a starter as a freshman, wound up being pretty good. And so you want those guys to stick around, because I think for all the talk about, hey, what is Bill Self doing in this era of college basketball, I think that's still something that he does really, really well, is guys that are in the program develop. And so if you had a chance to get Rakis Passmore back, by all means, ring that doorbell, make that a phone call. But I also think that what we're talking about here is not necessarily a player like Rakis. It's, hey, getting somebody that you feel like this is your secondary guy, either right with or just behind Darren Peterson.
One other guy to maybe keep in mind, and I'm just throwing this out there considering the circumstances.
All right.
We had talked about it earlier in the spring. 2026 number one player in the country out of high school, Tyron Stokes, visited Kansas. At that point, there was some discussion on the Kansas side of, could you convince him to reclass? He has publicly stated that he's not going to do that. There's been no indication that he has any interest in doing that. But from the Kansas perspective, that's probably a guy you maybe circle back to and say, hey, are you sure you don't want to maybe consider this?
That would change everything.
I just want to be very clear. I don't expect that to happen. I don't even really think that that's even a realistic possibility at this point. But from the Kansas perspective, going back to sort of that desperation mode, I think that's probably a phone call you make if you're Bill Self and say, hey, are you 100% sure that that's not something you'd be interested in? Because that right. I mean, you're talking about having two number one players with Darren Peterson and Tyron Stokes on the team. So again, I just very clear. I don't think that'll happen. I'm not expecting it to happen. It's probably not something that's even really remotely realistic at this point. But from the Kansas perspective, you probably still make that call at least and just see where things are at. But yeah, I think at this point, if you're Kansas, we talked about,
how's your family doing? Yeah, your summer going well? Yeah. Well, what's your number? Well, just out of curiosity, what is it? And how can we get this thing for sure? That's absolutely a call you make, because when you have two guys that talented on the same roster, especially in college basketball, when one of them is a guard that's going to have the ball in his hands like Darren Peterson is, yeah, you would be an absolutely elite team, even with role pieces around Darren Peterson, Tyron Stokes, and Flory Badunga. Even if you just had, hey, these guys are going to fill this specific role around them, you'd still be a pretty darn good basketball team.
Yeah, again, probably not going to happen. But
yeah,
if you're Bill Self, you probably pick up the phone there. I think definitely, as we've talked about, Darian Williams seems to be the best chance KU has at still getting a high profile type player, at least on the domestic side. Maybe I'm just going to admit it. I'm not an expert in international basketball. I don't know if there's another international possibility.
Are you a Star Wars guy?
I've never seen Star Wars, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I just need to say something.
Get in the comments. Let Nick know.
Before you burn the whole thing down, I just need to say something. I have not seen Star Wars, not because I'm one of those counterculture people that's like, oh, look at me, I'm so tough, I haven't seen Star Wars. I just literally have never sat down and watched it. When I was a kid, I played the Lego Star Wars video games. Lego Star Wars is so much fun. I just never sat down and watched the movies. And then, you get to a point eventually with stuff like that where it's there's so much new things coming out. You feel overwhelmed. I feel so overwhelmed about even trying to start, I feel the same way about Marvel movies. I was watching the Marvel movies up to a certain point, and then I missed one or two, and they just kept coming out, and I was like, dude, now I've got to watch 10 movies now because I've missed, it just, I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. I get overwhelmed about it. I'm like, so it's not because I don't like Star Wars. It's not because I'm not, I know the Star Wars story. I play all the Lego Star Wars video games. Those were great. I just have never sat down and watched the movies at this point. Maybe I should. Maybe that should be my goal for the summer. But that's just how it is.
I was going to say we have a homework assignment now, but I will say just in the first movie, which technically was movie number 4 because of the.
See, that's the other part of it. It's wait, we're starting on 4 and then we're going back and then
4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So in 4, A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie ever to come out. There's a line really early on where they fix R2-D2 and he blasts this sort of projection of Princess Leia, and she says, "Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope." And that is, I think, what Darren Peterson is starting to become for Kansas. He is the Obi-Wan, and he is the, I don't want to say the only hope, but it's certainly sort of grinding down to that point where he could be there. Yeah.
Yeah. You mean Darian Williams? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said Darren Peterson, but the point still stands.
Well, Darren Peterson was the only hope at one point, but yeah, Darian Williams to fill out this roster. Yes.
Yeah.
You are. I misspoke. That's my fault.
Darian Williams is the new only hope. We've had some other only hopes. He's the newest one.
Yeah. At one point, it was Peterson, like, please don't leave. You're our only hope.
Then it was Flory.
Then it was Flory, and now it's on you, Darren. So I don't know how many droids we've got in this scenario, but this droid is pointing out, help me, Darian Williams. You're our only hope.
Yeah, it may come down to that. We'll see. But again, the Dame Sarr recruitment is technically not over. I know we spent this whole show talking about it, but we'll see. I mean, maybe a pitch can be made or something one way or the other, but that's something, I guess, to continue monitoring. So we're gonna keep talking about KU sports, KU basketball, KU football, whatever updates. Maybe we'll have a show where the sky is falling for KU basketball and it is emergency. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a show where everything's fine and Darian Williams is on Kansas and everything's good. Time will tell. But if you want to ride the emotional roller coaster with us, you have to subscribe. So please do so. Apple, Spotify, on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KZSN. We very much appreciate it. Drop a comment, share your thoughts. Where are you out on the emotional roller coaster? Are we down low right now? Or where are we at? Let us know in the comments. And maybe share your favorite Star Wars, I guess, scene, line, whatever it may be, so that I have a better idea of what I should be getting into, I guess, since I haven't seen them yet. But absolutely, we really appreciate everybody tuning in as always. Again, be on the lookout for more shows. We're going to be talking more KU football. We still have a couple of position breakdowns or stuff to do, so we got to get to those. Also, at some point, I think Kevin, Big 12 released their over-under win totals for all the football teams.
Yep.
We'll probably talk about that at some point as well. So be on the lookout if you're looking for more KU football stuff. And of course, we'll be talking more KU basketball as things unfold. Hopefully,
baseball.
And as well, yes, we are going to have Dan Fitzgerald, the head coach of the KU baseball team, on our show next week. So you want to be on the lookout for that. They've had a fantastic season. They're gearing up for the postseason. They have one more series coming up this weekend against West Virginia. Then they'll go into the Big 12 tournament and into the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, Kansas has not been in the NCAA tournament since 2015. That will almost certainly change this year, as Kansas is certainly, I think at this point, going to be in the NCAA tournament, no matter what happens at the end of the year with the Big 12 tournament and so on and so forth. So be on the lookout for that. We've got some other guests. Hopefully we're going to be getting lined up over the coming weeks and into June and July as well, to hopefully provide more insight into all things happening around KU. So be on the lookout for that as well. So yeah, lots of stuff happening around here on the show. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in. That's going to do it for the show today. He's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.